Hi, welcome. Thanks for coming back after lunch. We'll get started. I'm Alex Komoroske.
And I'm Matt McNulty.
And we both work on Chrome on the Open Web Platform team. Now, before we get really started, I just want to reiterate that this is an intermediate level talk. So if you saw Eric's talk just before this, before lunch, you're probably all set. If not, there are going to be a lot of points where you're just scratching your head. And what you'll want to do is review some of the other specs and tutorials on some of these emerging web standards afterwards.
And all children should leave the room as well.
Yeah. So if you saw Eric's talk, you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, web components sounds really cool. Specifications are being finalized. Browsers are starting to implement them. But
if you're a web developer, you're thinking, I probably can't use these things. Call me in a few years when I actually can and when this is actually relevant to me.
So the good news for you is actually that this stuff works in all modern browsers today.
So here I have a version of To-Do MVC.
And if you don't know what To-Do MVC is, it's just a reference application. It's something that people use to write this application again in their framework to compare it and see how it feels compared to other frameworks.
But look, the interesting thing about this one, if I inspect elements, is it uses web components. So you see the entire thing is wrapped up in a td-app tag. And if I go into settings, I can click Show Shadow DOM, leave, reinspect. And you'll see now I can actually open that node, and the grayed out document fragment is actually a sign that you're in Shadow DOM now. So this entire little world inside this tag is encapsulated from the outside world. There's a hard border at the edge.
OK, but so that's easy, because that's Chrome. So what about something harder?
All right, in this VM, which I've paused because that seems to be the best way to get Windows to actually stay up for this period of time, for the purposes of this presentation, I've got it here in IE as well, in Windows 8.
So it's the same code using, again, these concepts of Shadow DOM web components, but it's working in IE. So how did we do this? How did we make this happen? Well, the answer is that we're impatient. We're really excited about web components, but we didn't want to wait to use them until they were in every modern browsers. The other important thing is we work on the Chrome team with some of the folks who are actively standardizing the web component stuff in the standards bodies. And when you're designing new web standards, it's really important to experiment with them, especially if they're very complex. What you don't want is you work on the specification for a while, you build consensus, you implement it, you ship it, and then you use it and you go, oof. Wow, that's really hard to use. And so you want to experiment with this stuff and feed that feedback directly back into the standardization process before it gets locked in. So we want to improve these standards and not just work around them. So we started what was kind of a crazy experiment to see if we could make this stuff work in modern browsers. We started a project a number of months ago on GitHub, doing everything fully in public. We called it Tool Kitchen until a few days ago, when we renamed it Polymer.
We renamed it a few times, actually.
Yeah, so if you're watching closely, there were 2 renames in a short succession. We've already gotten some really good community participation from folks who have found out about it and providing feedback. We're really happy about that. And we've also been able to provide feedback back into the specification process to help identify some areas in the specs that we thought needed to change.
Oops. So we're focused on modern browsers for a couple of reasons. Older browsers, you just can't polyfill some of this stuff. And really, it's time for a break. We want to move forward, and we don't want anyone who's using this stuff to be left behind, kind of like the current older browsers that don't update. You're headed for trouble if all you do is stare in the rearview mirror. So this approach is hard. We didn't know it would work. We actually didn't really know it would work for the first 6 months or so, about whether we could actually get this stuff working in a way that really emulated the future platform, in a way that we could work together and form a coherent system. We've been working with all the different standards bodies and providing feedback, as Alex said. Yeah.
But the point is actually that it does work today, and it brings you the future and allows you to build on top of it today. So the way I think about this is what's actually implemented in browsers today is like the bedrock. It's this solid foundation, but it's kind of uneven because different browsers have different support for different things. The answer to this is polyfills. Not a new concept. A polyfill is a JavaScript library that basically mocks out a future standard so that you can use it before it actually is deployed in all modern browsers. The goal with polyfills is to have really high fidelity. So that way, later, you don't even need it.
So perfect fidelity is not always possible in some of these things. Everyone always goes, oh, but what about? And they're usually right. So things like styling scoping, encapsulation in any sort of real significant way are just not possible in JavaScript, but we've gotten pretty close.
So we'll go over these polyfills very briefly. These are almost all of these are emerging standards. So we only have a chance to say about a sentence about each one. If you're wondering what these are, check out the specs, check out the tutorials to learn more about these.
So mutation observers allow for the efficient observations of DOM. So when new nodes are added or attributes are changed, this one's actually already shipping in most modern browsers.
So the next one is pointer events. This is a specification that unifies the event models for touch and mouse. It allows you to write the same code and have it run on mobile devices and desktop devices as well. In fact, everything we're showing you here today works both on desktop and on mobile devices.
So Shadow DOM is a pillar of web components. This brings encapsulation to the platform for the first time, which is really, really, really big, and we'll show that to you in a little bit. It's also incredibly complicated, especially to grasp right away. But the big point is it gives you the ability to encapsulate things within a tag. And so if you need to know more about that, I refer you to Eric's talk that happened just before this one, or just before lunch.
The next one is custom elements. This is another pillar of web components. It allows you to define your own tags and have them operate just like any other tags in the browser. It allows you to create these elements and put whatever you want inside of them, even ones of arbitrary complexity, then have them treated just like any other tag that you're familiar with, like the video tag or canvas or whatever.
HTML imports, this one was known as a few different things, link rel imports, web components itself briefly for a little bit, but now it's HTML imports. And the big thing with this one, it allows you to package CSS, JavaScript, HTML into a single module and import it into your app. And it allows reusability across multiple applications or multiple parts of your application.
So this next one is MDV, which stands for model-driven views. This is the only one in this list that isn't really an emerging standard yet, although hopefully one day it will be. It's something that allows you to do data binding directly in HTML. And as we've been playing with all these, this is one that really allows us to eliminate a lot of boilerplate code in practice.
So web animations unifies CSS and SVG animations. It exposes the primitives beneath those. And allows you to create really complex animation sequences separate from the things that you want to animate. It's actually a really, really cool project. It predates when we started working on Toolkitchen, now Polymer. And actually Mozilla, Google, and Adobe were all collaborating on that polyfill, and it's included.
So together these form a stable foundation that allows you to pretend like you're living in the future and build there. So the cool thing about polyfills is that over time, as browser vendors implement these features, the need for them goes away. And so ultimately, at some point in the future, you wouldn't even need this layer at all.
So, and one of the other great things about this is we designed this to be a la carte. So you can use each individual polyfill, or you can combine a couple of together, or you can take the entire thing. And if you want actually to take the entire platform and a minimized and gzip version of that, it's actually only 31K. So think about that. That's actually the entire future of the web platform for about the size of an icon.
Most of the future of the web platform. So we've been talking about modern browsers. Let me define that real quick. This is our compatibility chart for our polyfills. It includes Chrome, Firefox, IE, Safari, also their mobile variants. We call these the evergreen browsers. These are browsers that are modern, that they support many of the new standards. They also, importantly, keep their users updated by default. So users don't have to do anything special just to stay on the newest one. So the users aren't going to live in the past for long, because when there's a new version, they'll just come along to the new version, which is really important. Okay, so Web Components provides, this foundation layer provides a lot of like a utility belt that allows you to build apps, but it's not everything you need. You need some higher level stack pieces to fit them together and really make them work together.
We realized we needed to build a toolkit. So this toolkit, which we call Polymer, it weaves together all of the lower level pieces of the platform into a whole cloth for building applications. And it's also where we express our opinion on top of that.
So this layer, unlike the layer below it, which will disappear over time, this layer will continue to exist because it's not part of any spec. It's our opinion on how to use these things productively together. Although, hopefully, maybe if these kinds of patterns become popular and other libraries use them too, well, maybe this is something that could be specified in a web standard in the future, maybe.
So we started out with some core principles and to build a new kind of toolkit, right? One with the future in mind. So this is, we're leaving behind the past. We've got these new toys to play with. What can we do if we actually had all of these things? And does it actually work?
So these principles are use the platform, eliminate boilerplate, and everything is an element.
So use the platform. So this is a big change, at least for me and others who have built JavaScript frameworks before. For the most part, the web has been not particularly great spot to build web apps. The platform, like Alex said, right, it's rocky, it's uneven on the bottom. As a result, a lot of really, really talented JavaScript developers have spent their time building frameworks and building these entire worlds in separate render trees and doing really kind of crazy, amazing things like using iframes to force rendering behavior in the browser. Just to get around problems on the platform. So we were tasked very specifically, no tricks. So if you hit a problem and something doesn't work well, we're on the Chrome team. So we're actually allowed to go to the guy around the corner in the next cube and say, hey, can you fix this?
Let's file a bug. Let's get that fixed.
File a bug. So we wanted to use the platform, but not just the existing platform, but this new platform. We have all these new toys that were being given. We wanted to see what we could do with them.
The next one was to eliminate boilerplate. So on this team, we're really very, very adamant about that you should only write the code that is unique to your app and nothing more. You shouldn't have to be recreating these things every single time you're writing an app.
And everything is an element. This one's actually really, really important, but I'm going to hammer it home about 100 more times so you can not pay attention to this one. So the idea is every single thing is a module, right? And is an element. And you build applications out of bigger and bigger elements made of more and more elements, up to and including an actual app. By doing this, and you've got all these reusable little portions, you keep a developer's context really local. You reduce bugs. And it makes it so that, from the perspective of a developer at any given time, an application can be arbitrarily simple and complex at the same time. So we wanted a system that weaves together the platform to enable component-based apps. So everything is an element, and all elements have Shadow DOM encapsulating them. Polymer makes building elements easier. And from the outside, from the inside, you're building your element in Polymer. From the outside, it's just an element. It looks like every other DOM element.
So just like every other DOM element, the way you pass in configuration is via attributes, and the way you pass things out of it is via events. So from the outside perspective, it's just an element.
So this is an example Polymer.js element. This one is a Polymer panels element. So all custom elements need to have a dash in the name. That's the only requirement. It used to be an X dash. But this allows for different vendors to provide their own prefix to things and namespace to things. And it's important to note this is not XML namespacing. There's no collision detection or things like that. People just have to be on good behavior. So in this case, it's a Polymer panels app that would provide, like, say, a series of sliding panels or a carousel or something like that. So one of the first big features that we add is declarative mapping of custom and DOM events to methods within the element. So in this case, when a select event is fired, the panel select handler element with that method name, this is not code that's executed, will be run on the actual element.
So again, this makes it easy to behave just like any other element and pass state out via events.
Yeah, and one of the nice things we like about this is rather than like what's currently in vogue with out-event listener and for security reasons, we've reestablished a way of doing it in declarative. Kind of the whole thing we're doing here, every single thing we do, you can also do imperatively, but we like this idea of the declarative renaissance. So the next thing is custom attributes. So you've got custom elements, you need custom attributes. This is the API that your element exposes to the world. And then one of the big things we add is data binding, and this is powered by MDV. This radically reduces code complexity. We're going to demo this in a little bit, so we'll get into it more. And there's a whole bunch more, but this is the big picture. And if you combine all of this with all the new platform bits, you end up with something pretty awesome. So as we were using this already made it much easier to build apps, but we weren't satisfied because we were realizing that we were rebuilding the same kinds of UI widgets again and again. And every framework that wants to make it easy to build apps, they should help you build UIs as well. We really needed to build a set of really great widgets. And so we've just begun that a few weeks ago.
So this is the sort of completing this diagram. I want to take a moment to reflect really quickly on our approach. So in a lot of other frameworks are sort of forced to do everything in script. They have to do very, very, very clever engineering to replace the platform below them because it doesn't do the things they need. So they end up building their own parallel universes that don't interoperate very well because they've created their own worlds. What we were trying to do is fix the platform, is actually provide feedback back to the platform, use the emerging standards. One thing that's cool about web components is that your interoperability layer is just the DOM, because an element is an element, you know how to work with it. And that means that for the first time, actually, it's possible for UI elements to be interoperable. So you'll see in this diagram, it's actually very hard to see here. There's other boxes to the right of this, because other UI elements could be built on top of some of these layers of the foundation and interoperate with them. And we'll show you a little bit more about that later. But also in Polymer, we've taken a layered approach to everything. So if you want to use our UI elements, great, you get the whole stack. If you just want to use a single polyfill by itself, cool, just take that one, or anything in between. So you can sort of figure out exactly how much of this stuff you want to use. So we've been talking a whole lot about this, but rather than continue to just talk about it, let's show you how all this stuff works.
All right, so here we have a code editor. This is actually just the ACE code editor that we threw in a browser with some other fancy stuff. And this is an element definition. So if you saw this from Eric's talk, it should be somewhat familiar. This one's ever so slightly different because it's a Polymer element. But the basics are still there. So you've got an element tag. In this case, the name attribute says it's my-element. That means that's the tag we're going to create. So when this element definition is around, a tag that says my element will include all of this stuff. The template tag is the DOM that you want to stamp out when this tag is used. There's actually a whole bunch of really cool things you can do with template and iterate and all these other things. I encourage you to go look that up after this. And then there's the script tag, which provides the prototype for the element and various behaviors if you want to add. So in this case, we'll just start out really simple, and I'll add a div with hello world in it.
So if you can't see it, I know this is a big room back there. If you can't see it, you can zoom in a little bit maybe, but check it out. All this stuff is in the repo afterwards. We can provide you a link. Sorry about that.
There you go. So now if I preview this. Look at that, hello world.
That is amazing. Absolutely mind-blowing.
But if I look inside it, you can see here's our element definition that we created, and right next to it is an actual instance of my element. And inside that is shadow DOM, so everything's encapsulated. And inside that, you can see our div.
So if you're scratching your head, this is the point where I remind you, this is an intermediate level talk. And if this confuses you, you should check out, learn more about shadow DOM. So in fact, to see this stuff, the shadow DOM in Inspector, you actually have to check an option to see it. It's not available by default because it's encapsulation.
All right, so one of the cool things is you don't actually have to use just normal DOM elements in here. You can have custom elements that include other custom elements. So in this case, I'm going to switch it to one of our custom elements, gratings. And this element is cool for a few reasons. It's very easy to type, so I can't mistype it here. It doesn't need any properties or attributes by default. And what it gives you is a bunch of stars you can click on. It's like a star rating thing. Preview it. And look at that, we've got stars.
So these are just custom elements. So if you're looking at this in the DOM as another library, it's just an element. You know how to work with it. Attributes in, events out.
Yep. There it is, still in my element. And then here you can start to see the shadow DOM within shadow DOM and all the markup within. All right, so this is pretty cool, but you're like, oh, you've got your own little tool.
Your own little universe that you've built.
You're probably cheating somehow. So we can take the source for that document we're creating, bring it over to JSBin. And it's the same thing.
So it looks like a little bit of boilerplate here. There's only a couple of pieces that are actually crucial to make this work. So the point is that it's very easy to use this within other contexts. So we believe you, by the way, this is all just HTML, but let's go a little bit faster so we don't bore them.
Yeah, so it would be boring to sit here and watch me write HTML. So we did something to make it a little bit faster and more interesting. We built an element builder. So this was just the product of the last few weeks. We know we're not really planning on shipping a tool anytime soon. But it allows you to build elements and bind them together into new elements and really explore it. So it's a nice little showcase for what we've built so far and the technology underneath.
So I'm going to reiterate that. This is just a demo tool. It's not an IDE. You don't need to use this to use Polymer. It's just for playing around with this stuff and getting a feel for it.
So we can rate Alex so far.
Oh, thank you.
We can change it.
Not so nice, thank you.
So you'll see as I'm changing things in here, the number of stars selected, the values are changing over here in the property inspector. So this tool should be, this kind of tool is pretty familiar for a lot of people. You've got a palette down the left-hand side, you've got a toolbar across the top, and then a property inspector down the right-hand side.
Can you flip to the code real quick?
So it's actually not doing anything fancy. Anytime I change something here, it actually just changes the attribute in the tag.
So basically all this tool is doing, it's just a convenience for piping in those attributes, just saving you the typing yourself. It's not doing anything magic.
All right, so that's the tool to begin with. Let's do something more interesting with MDV. So if I pull out a few other widgets, let's do some tabs and a menu and a caption. And this won't make any sense, but it'll show something really kind of interesting. So I can tap around on these things and tap around on them independently. And if I come over to the code, you can see that when I inserted that, I actually just inserted a bunch of custom tags and even some normal native DOM tags. So the tabs takes a bunch of spans, the menu takes a bunch of menu items, and then the caption is actually just a div. So one of the really cool features of this toolkit is MDV. And MDV allows you to bind elements together and attributes together without any actual code. So at first, I'm actually going to add a variable to the prototype of the element here.
So a property that you'd just be able to use just like any other JavaScript object.
I can add however many I want. And then if I come up to any attribute within the element, in this case selected, I can use this double mustache syntax, which is MDV, and say.
So with this G menu, the way that you specify which one's selected is, again, with an attribute, just like any other element.
So now the tabs and the menu, in this case, both have a selected attribute. That's not at all required. It's because they both have the concept of what's selected in the selected index. So if I come back to the code now, except for that one. There we go, just had to clear the CSS. You can see them connected together. And you can actually do this right in the tool as well. So instead of just a caption, I can click this little linked and put in the same thing. And now they're all tied together. And now I can take this entire thing and say publish, clear the canvas, and now the whole thing is itself a custom element that I can drag off the palette. And it still goes together. And not only that, you can see the mySelected property that I added to the prototype, and even the foo one, even though it doesn't actually do anything. All right, so we built a custom element, and all without doing any JavaScript, actually.
So it's actually kind of cool, right? We tie these things together, and if you look in the code view for this one as well, you'll see that this is just now a my element. So the stuff inside is sort of hidden away. You pass in that mySelected that we defined on the prototype, just there as an attribute. And it wires all this stuff up together for you, so you don't have to write any script to get this kind of behavior. It's pretty cool.
So then one of the other really cool things is that you can make your own custom elements, and one of the other uses for that is you can wrap up existing functionality on the web and put it in a single tag, and it's encapsulated from the rest of your page so that you don't have any conflicts or system level dependencies that you're creating. In which case, we'll show you one really crazy one from our friends at Mozilla, actually. They built a 1 megabyte PDF viewer entirely in JavaScript.
Which is crazy, but awesome.
We have the complete works of Chaucer in here. And if you go to the code, you can see it's actually just a single tag.
So this is kind of crazy, right? Like you're used to including all these scripts and having these weird dependencies and stuff. You just write a few characters, one include, write a few characters, and you've got a PDF viewer directly in your page. It really changes how you think about architecting your applications.
And we've got other ones in here that we just threw in again in the last few weeks. We've got charts and things like that.
These are just open source libraries other people have built.
Yep, and again, they're all just wrapped into a single tag. So it gives you this almost module pattern that you can use to combine things from different vendors. One of the other neat things you can do is use web animations, which we talked about earlier. So I can actually bring out a few slightly fancier widgets. let's do a clock. So just for the demo, tags don't actually have to have UI, right? Like a script tag doesn't have anything visual about it. But just for this demo, we came over, actually we'll do flip. And made it so that these things have a UI, so we can click on them in the canvas and do interesting things. So in this case, it's a flip animation, and we can say, let's flip the clock. And let's do it for a second. And now if I come back here and click on it, clock flips.
So behind the scenes, this is just using web animations, again, another emerging standard. But the cool thing about thinking about animations configured via these non-visible elements is that you can separate the animation that you're defining from the element itself and just sort of point at the other one. The elements don't have to be visual. That's one of the cool things when everything is an element.
Yeah, one of the other really cool things that web animations gives you is the ability to do really long, really complex, intricate animations, and separate from what their target is, right? And you can just define this and drag it out however you want. You reuse it and all of that. So in this case, we have a whole group. So we can say, let's, bounce the clock this time. Let's flip the weather, because it's not that nice out. And let's shake up the market, because I've run out of puns. And now if I do it, you can see them do one after the other, or I can actually make it happen in parallel. So just a little taste of what you can do with web animations. Another thing we're doing is experimenting with responsive design and building it directly into the widgets. I can come over here. This is another version of the sandbox, not full screen, so that I can actually change the window size. If I come in here and I start shrinking this down, you can see it's got a toolbar across the top of the drop-down menu. And if I shrink it small enough, hey, it pops down to the bottom and splits, because it's phone or tablet size now, and automatically flips to be a little menu that pops up. That's more of a phone size, full screen, full bleed kind of treatment. So this is not just theoretical, but we really just getting started with this kind of element. And in fact, everything you see here works on mobile, especially because we're using pointer events. So we're not going to put this on the camera or anything, but you can actually, on my iPad, if I can hold it straight, drag stuff out off the palette on my iPad, and it just works.
So all this stuff is really early. We just started playing around with this, but we're approaching this entire project with a very mobile-first perspective. The ideal that we're working towards is that as a developer, you write your code once, you define, okay, this is a menu or what have you, and then it automatically adjusts across mobile or desktop or tablet to do the right thing for you.
All right, so we've shown that you can drag a bunch of elements out to make other elements. You can bind them together arbitrarily. You can use third-party code. Let's actually try and put all of this together into something fun. So we have a YouTube widget. We call this the I'm Feeling Lucky YouTube widget, because all it does is take the very first query and play it. You see a little Chrome commercial. I also call it the I'm Feeling Risky demo widget.
That's a wholesome commercial, though, so we're OK.
Yeah, there was a cat video I was using earlier in which I discovered last night the people in the background were cursing. I'd never had the sound on. So that one went out the window. So let's give this a border.
So it's just a normal element, so you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, just a normal element. And then we can actually use the speech input. Put it in here. And we combine the YouTube query instead of using this plain Chrome commercial query to the inputs value. So now if I come here and the sound system and demo gods are in alignment, I can go cats. And we've got all the cats you should use.
So again, if you check out this code, there's great. Now we have distracting cats on the screen. Thank you, Matt. So if you check out that code, it's just using that MDV syntax to plug those things together. The magic isn't from the Sandbox app. The magic is from the platform and that layer, that sugar layer that we call Polymer.
We can do multiple cats across the screen and really annoy Alex.
So all this stuff is great, but you've seen this kind of thing before. Other frameworks have done similar kinds of things. What is cool about this web components approach where you have actual encapsulation between them is it allows for the first time the potential for components from different sets to intermingle seamlessly. So in this world, interoperability layer is the DOM, and everyone knows how to use the DOM, how to pass in attributes, receive events out. And again, the Polymer library as well is layered, so you can take just the parts you want.
So one of the cool things we've been doing lately is our friends at Mozilla have been building X tags in their X tags library, which is similar in concept to the Polymer widgets, on top of the same foundation layer that we showed you before.
So they're experimenting with using one of our polyfills in their system as well.
Yeah, so it took us no time at all to put them in the palette, and I can actually drag out some of their widgets here.
So let me just emphasize this. These are widgets that come from a different framework that are also built on top of web components. And so we can just seamlessly use them in the same environment, in the same app. This is kind of mind-blowing, right? This is very new.
And one of the really cool things is because this is just web components, and these are just elements, and you can bind them together just like any other DOM elements, we can take our toggle button, and we can bind its value to the X tag switch, checked property. And now they'll actually play together.
So that's two separate libraries playing together seamlessly. So we think that this interoperability potential for web components is a really big deal. If you think about everything as an element, you can have these small building blocks, you package them up into larger building blocks, and before you know it, you have entire reusable applications all in one tag.
So up to and including this entire sandbox application, which was built using Polymer. And as a result, we put it in the palette. And we can pull it out.
Matt, that's cool, but we must go deeper.
All right, everyone get your totems ready. We've had an Inception reference.
So that's pretty cool. This in the past would have required very careful planning, following all the rules, all this kind of stuff. With web components and Polymer, you just get this kind of encapsulation for free. So we've started building this app just a few weeks ago, actually, as the foundation layers got pretty solid. And we were amazed at how quickly we could build it, because when you're using these concepts to build elements and then larger elements out of them, you just are so much more productive. It's like a whole new world. It's really cool.
So that's Polymer and Sandbox as it exists right now. If you're adventurous and unafraid of living on the bleeding edge, and I would like to emphasize bleeding edge, this is a particular version of Canary that was working right now. We encourage you to check it out. It's all on GitHub. It's all open right now.
So we started this as an experiment at the beginning to see what we could do. But the deeper we've gone, the more and more excited we've gotten. The more that we feel like this is sort of on the cusp of something big with web components. We really believe that with web components, developers will be an order of magnitude more productive, building more and better apps. So we pulled together a video that we hope will get you as excited about this future that we're going towards as we are. So that's what we've got. You can find all this stuff at our website, polymer-project.org. Learn more, provide feedback. Please, please, please ask us questions, provide comments, file bugs. We'd love to get your participation. Thanks. Now we got time for questions, so go ahead.
I'm curious, I'm looking at what you have here and I'm thinking back to MooTools and jQuery and how we got query selector all standardized out of that. And I'm wondering, when you look at something like Angular that has a lot of similar concepts, how this interplays if you see Angular in the future as being another sugar layer on top of something like Polymer, or if web components replaces Angular?
So we aren't from the Angular team. There might be a few folks from that team in the audience. They're aware of this stuff. They've been playing around with web components, providing feedback back to the standardization process as well. One of the approaches with Polymer that's really important is the layered approach. That means that other frameworks could take just one polyfill or all of them or what have you. And so I imagine that maybe that's something that other frameworks might want to experiment with, is building on top of those layers, if they want. I mean,
do you see the web components specification is replacing the need for a lot of the embers and the angulars and things that are popular now?
I think that's the wrong way of thinking about it. I think that the web components provides a lot of that utility belt. There's always that need for sort of that opinion to weave all that stuff together. And I think that frameworks will always have a place in this world because you're going to need it to help you build your apps. Okay. So it brings you far, but not all the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely likely that they'll have to use less code to do what they're doing, which is great for them and great for everyone else. But yeah.
I guess we got one in the back there.
Actually, I was going to ask about Angular too, but I think it got answered. So my other question would be then, is this something that you can, I mean, obviously you're using Canary, so you're using a very advanced build. Is this something that you expect we'll need to use only when we can tightly control the environment in which it's running? I came in a little late, so backwards compatibility is my question.
Just to reiterate, actually, the approach we're taking is building a layer of polyfills that sort of mocks out the future. So Matt's using Canary, so we can actually show you real Shadow DOM being used. But this stuff should work across all modern browsers, i.e. Safari, Firefox, Chrome. And over time, as they implement these standards, that sort of foundation layer will get thinner and thinner.
So when you say modern browsers, I assume there'll be a level that we'll need to test for, and then...
That's correct. So one of the goals here is to really live like we're in the future, and if you're staring in the rearview mirror, you're headed for trouble. So we want to make sure that we can actually simulate the future in a high fidelity way.
When you pulled up the Xcode bits from the Mozilla team, you said there was...
Xtags.
I'm sorry?
Xtags.
Xtags. You said it was significant because you were pulling that in from a third party, another vendor. Where's the actual technical significance there? If they're kind of just doing the same thing, I didn't see like a threshold between Polymer and Xtags.
So generally, if you wanted two libraries to play together previously, they had to either be built very specifically to do that and not introduce kind of system level dependencies, or they would collide and you just have to get lucky, right? So the idea is with these things being encapsulated is that you don't have those system level dependencies, and really the world inside of that element, which is what's using Mozilla's code, is completely separate from the world outside of that element. So you can mix and match these things together a lot easier.
So the idea
without having to deal with those collisions.
Before web components, you had to make everything in script, and so you have these conventions of what it means to be a component. And everyone's conventions have to align for them to be interoperable. With web components, people can align their conventions on web components, the standards, and then that makes them interoperable much more easily.
So did you have another library you pulled in to use those X tags, and they just coexist then because they're creating DOM elements that are all happy together?
So theoretically, you could just have a different include. You can include a component. In the future, you could include a component from Polymer's UI library. You can include a component from X tags. You could intermingle the two. Or a third party or a framework that's yet to be created.
Yeah, it's all in that HTML import thing.
It's that UI aspect that's above Polymer and everything else that was significant in that respect.
Yeah.
X tag versus your components.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So I would confirm a simple question. This Polymer tool also works with Chrome packaged apps.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, does it work right now?
Works?
Right now, it does not work due to just the way we did the polyfill violates CSP.
I see.
So then, Chrome apps is very specific about that. But in the very near future, once the HTML imports feature, which is the thing that's loading things from across domains, is done natively, which is pretty soon, then it'll work.
Yeah, so actually, HTML imports is being implemented it's just started being implemented in Chrome.
Yes. I'm looking for that.
Yeah, so you can still use parts, so as Daniel was pointing out, you can still use some parts like document.register, even if you can't use some of these other pieces like HTML imports. We got one in the back?
You were talking about modern browsers. I was wondering if you could elaborate on mobile support.
So it's mobile Safari and mobile
Chrome
for Android.
That we tested so far.
Android browser.
Chrome for Android.
Yeah, Chrome for Android at the moment is the only one we're testing on.
Okay, thanks.
Again, it's very early days.
Back to like several years ago, there was actually a similar like technique that was aimed to achieve the similar level of encapsulation, which is XML plus XSLT. The essential of that is, the picture of that is essentially you will create a heavy element focused, say web interface instead of like having to take care about all the under layers. What would you compare that to web components?
I think there's been a number of things that are similar to web components in the past. None of them have really stuck around for various reasons. There's the things like XBL, which is still used actually in parts of Gecko. You've got things like the HTC stuff from Microsoft. You've got a bunch of other things that aim to solve similar kinds of problems. Web components is now like an emerging set of specs that is
Yeah, so the difference here is that you're using the same technologies you already use on the web today, right? You're using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There's actually nothing new here. Whereas XSLT, I did a whole framework in XSLT like 10 years ago, and that was to debug that was one of the more insane things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Okay, and so we're actually out of time, I believe. So if you have more questions, you can come find us up here after the talk. Thanks.
Thanks.